When did you last visit a hemophilia treatment center? A Hemophilia Treatment Center, or HTC, is a group of healthcare professionals that provide a comprehensive approach to your medical care through disease education and support programs for patients and families. They can also connect you to local bleeding disorder community groups. Between HTC visits, keep a health journal to record your treatment history. Include details such as prophylactic and on-demand infusions, bleeding episodes and triggers, any days of school or work missed, and any questions you may have. Finally, if your medical insurance has changed, speak with your insurance company to ensure coverage before your visit. Bring your health journal to HTC visits so you can inform your healthcare provider of your treatment status. Remember to inform them of any recent medical changes. Write down any instructions regarding prescribed treatments. Confirm your follow-up plan. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Taking these steps will help you get the most out of your visit. Let's make today brilliant. Prepare for your next HTC visit and get more information about managing your bleeding disorder at bleedingdisorders.com.
Good morning and welcome to the New York City Hemophilia Chapter's Financial Literacy Series. This series was developed as a way to really help the community out and empower the community. We know that folks can go through tough times with finances anytime. And a lot of people across the nation are having some tough times right now, but having a chronic condition like a bleeding disorder makes it even harder. So that's why we started this series, and we've been talking about things like getting back into the workforce. We've been talking about savings. Today we have another wonderful guest to kind of help us out. Dr. Donald Asher is an internationally recognized author and speaker on the topics of career and higher education. In media, he is often identified as a career guru. Asher assists C-level executives with career transitions and performance optimization. He works with MBA and graduate programs nationwide. He consults with PhDs on industry careers for Cheeky Scientist, Inc. He recently served as the content architect for Elite Optimization Services, providing career development to Olympic athletes. His career books include Who Gets Promoted, and when you register for any of our events, we are going to connect you to some of his content. Earlier this year, he gave away some of his books. He's well known in the world of financial literacy, so I'm very happy to have him here. Please put your hands together and welcome Donald Asher.
Thank you, Jeremy. So I'm excited about this topic because I think of this as introduction to financial literacy. So I'm going to be covering some things that really matter. And as we had discussed when we were designing this, sometimes people need this at different stages in their life. So we're not making an assumption that somebody is 22 or 42. So it's for everybody. So let's take a look.
Before you get started, I just wanted to let folks know that you're right. This is for everybody. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure people knew is this wouldn't be possible. This whole series wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. Right now, this series is sponsored by Pfizer, Takeda, Genentech, and CVS. So big round of applause to them. And with that, I'll hand it back over to you so you can get us started.
Thank you, Jeremy. And so it's important to acknowledge the sponsors. Absolutely. All right. So again, this is Introduction to Financial Literacy, and we're off to the races. Okay. So I have some ideas about different topical areas that are important for people to know about. One of them is the miracle of compound interest. Once you learn this concept, your whole financial viewpoint can change. So the miracle of compound interest is an important principle. The thin green line, a concept that I think once you see it, you'll be able to grasp that forever. Good debt versus bad debt, credit and credit scores, the basics of investing, insurance, how to move to a new city, and lies, damn lies, and the manipulation of statistics to kind of butcher up a little Mark Twain. So that's what we're going to cover today. My very first thing we have to talk about is you have to decide to become a saver. This is super important because saving is the foundation for all subsequent financial success. And you can save on any income. That doesn't seem logical if you've been struggling just to get by, but I think I'll show you a few ways to do it here in just a moment. But being able to save is the only thing that frees up all of these techniques. So you have to figure out how to do that. And a challenge people have is where did you get your financial norms? We get our financial norms from our family and our friends and our neighborhoods. And unfortunately, some of us come from families that were not savers. As a matter of fact, lots of us do. And so we may have to combat training that we got as a young person. Saving is a norm for society, but it may not be in your family. If your family lived month to month, and by the way, this has nothing to do with income. There are quite well-off people that live month to month. You're going to have to retrain yourself about how to handle money in order to implement any of the solutions and techniques and strategies in play here. Saving is possible on any income, even if you're just picking up cans and turning them in. Unfortunately, half of all Americans have no cash cushion at all. So this study came out 8 years ago, and it's been repeated last year. About half of the people in the United States could not cover an unexpected $400 expense. And $400 expenses come up like a car repair, a medical bill that you got stuck with, appliance failure. Easily, these things could create a 400, frankly, to much more than that expense. About 40% more could cover that expense with difficulty. That means they could borrow the money from a friend, they could use a payday loan, they could have a credit card that would cover it. And then 10% simply have no way to cover that expense at all. What you want to be is part of the 50% who already have that money set aside. So that's just part of this mindset of being a saver. And so how do you have more money at the end of the month? These are ways. People are often taught that things are necessary. They're actually not necessary. So if you're struggling at the end of the month, take a look at some of these. Having a roommate could reduce your cost. Not having a car. Of course, many of your members are in New York City, so they don't have cars anyway. Not eating out, not joining your friends on that adventure in Cancun, not having the latest fashions, and buying used stuff. These are ways to start to cut down on expenses that you may have been taught all your life are necessary when they're not. My sister-in-law is a doctor. She's extremely frugal. She bought the clothes that she wears professionally at thrift stores. I'm not willing to go there, but it's an example of changing your mindset. So here we go into the principles. A lot of this talk, Jeremy, is driven by concepts and principles that once you gain the concept, it should drive a lot of your decision making. The miracle of compound interest is that compound interest is exponential in increasing your investment. And saving it, if you just put it in the bank and let it sit there, you have a linear increase. And over time, compound interest is an extremely powerful tool over time. And I'll show you how this works. So see that curved line is exhibiting exponential increase. That person on the curved line has a much better response. And one way to teach this is to tell the parable of grains of rice on a chessboard. The story is that a traveling sage challenged a king to a game of chess. And if he won the game, the king had a very high opinion of his chess abilities. And if he won, the king would give him whatever he wanted. And so he said, well, I'll just make this easy. All I want if I win is you put a grain of rice on the first checkerboard of the chessboard, 2 grains of rice on the second square, and 4 grains of rice. Just double it each time, and I'll be happy with rice. So the king says, oh my gosh, what a low bet. Well, okay, it's a bet. So they played the game of chess. The traveling sage won, and then the truth of what he had wagered became known. So this is the first 2 lines of the chessboard. So square one's got 1 grain of rice, double it, 2 grains of rice, double it, 4 grains of rice, double it, 8 grains of rice. And you see at the bottom of the second row is 32,768 grains of rice. But by the time you get to that bottom right-hand square, doubling it each time, this is how many grains of rice it is. It's 18 quintillion, 446 quadrillion, 744 trillion, 73 billion, 709 million, 551,615 grains of rice. That's enough rice to cover the country of India 1 meter deep in rice. So that's the wager, but that's the power of compound interest. Your investments can gain like this. So let's take a look at these two people, Cody and Kat. Okay, Cody, he struggles in his 20s, but after his 20s, he saves $5,000 per year from age 32 for 30 straight years. He saves $5,000 a year, and he saves $150,000. Now, Kat saves $5,000 per year only for the first 10 years of her career, and then she stops investing altogether. She just stops. So, wow, with 7% compounding interest, Cody will have $540,000 on his 62nd birthday, and Kat will have $600,000 on her 62nd birthday. She saved 1/3 as much, but she saved it in the first 10 years instead of the second, third, and fourth decades. This is an important principle to get. I mean, young people often are like, well, I'll save later. I'll start this later. If you start it young, then the miracle of compound interest works in your favor. Let's say you want to be a millionaire. If you want to be a millionaire, it's actually extraordinarily simple. You save $5,000 a year from the time that you start working until you retire, and you will have $1 million. That's all it takes. That's all it is. But you have to do it every year, and you have to start at the beginning. Now, let's take a look at some expenses that people often say are necessary. It turns out, certainly I believe they're not so necessary. So let's say that a cup of coffee that you get every morning, you walk by the barista shop, it's fancy. You happen to love the cafe latte. So you go in, you get a venti, it's $4.15. You do that 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. But if you didn't stop by and do that, and you put that in the bank at 7% return, guess what? You'd have $241,000 at age 62. So if you look at this way, you're actually working 2 years just to have that coffee, which you could also make at home, just to have that coffee. This is an important slide because people don't factor how small expenses over time compound. So that's the idea of working 2 extra years for a coffee company certainly is a surprise to people. So that's number one, the miracle of compound interest. Number 2 is the thin green line. The thin green line is a concept. If you spend less than you make, then you don't have this compounding burden. And if you spend even a few dollars more than you make, then you will have a compounding burden over time that's oppressive. How compounding? Well, if you were just $4 off 5 days a week, it'd be $241,000 over time. So I recognize that life is complex. It throws surprises at us. So when you have to spend more than that green line, then you have to put it back the next month, or you will get on the wrong side of this. It's a very simple concept that no one does. People don't pay attention to this thin green line. If you stay on the left side of it, spend less than you earn, you will be happy in life. If you get on the wrong side of it, you're gambling that you will someday in the future be able to get on the correct side of it again. So just as important as saving is this idea of living on the left side of that green line. That means you have to avoid carrying a balance on a credit card. You might use that credit card to solve a problem, but then you've got to get that paid off. Credit cards average right now is 17% and rising rapidly at this current time in the United States. Paying off that balance then becomes the same as getting 17% on your investments. So if you pay that off and you don't have that expense, that's the same as if you were paid that much a return on your investment. So it's a very good place for you to put your money, is getting rid of any outstanding credit card debt. So you should use your credit cards only for temporary emergencies and try really hard never to carry a balance. If you do carry a balance, get rid of it as fast as possible. Here's a warning about gig work. So many people these days are using gig work both as a primary source of income, but also as a side source of income. Gig work makes you an independent contractor. So when you get paid on gig work, you need to put 25% of that aside for taxes, or you will get bitten very hard on April 15th of next year. So just make a habit of it. When you get paid from your gig work, bank in a savings account 25% of that pay every single time, and then your taxes will not be a burden to you. They won't be shocking. The other thing is that many people who do gig work don't think of themselves as a business. Well, you are. According to the IRS, you are a business if you get 1099 income. And that means that you can have business expenses to offset some of that gig work. So run your gig work like a business, and you'll be both prepared for taxes and also have less taxes to pay. Now, budgeting is a big part of succeeding with your financial plans. Not everybody has to budget the same way. And I want to stress this to the whole community. There's more than one right way to do this, more than one right answer. I sometimes don't like it when people who teach what I'm teaching right now say, oh, you got to do it this way. That's not really true. There's a bunch of ways to do it. So I'll come into those differing approaches in just a moment. But first of all, I want to talk about needs versus wants. Needs versus wants is a standard part of financial planning. The problem is needs and wants are a little bit flexible. What one person thinks of as a want, another person will think of as a need. A perfect example is private school for your kids. One person may say, you don't have to have private school for your kids. And another person will say, absolutely, you do. So that's a kind of a big example, but it could be smaller. Maybe for one person, that latte in the morning is the only way they can get to work. And the other person's like, I don't need that. So needs and wants change over time. They're big and they're small, but you can start to look at things and see them as needs or wants. So how can you be more frugal? We talked about a few ways a few minutes ago. One of the things you also, in addition to all of those money-saving ideas, is get rid of your zombie fees. People are walking around paying $100, $200 a month for stuff they don't even use. They signed up for something 3 years ago and forgot to turn it off. Go through your credit cards and remove zombie fees. Magazines. I had a magazine. It went up. The teaser cost of the magazine was something very reasonable, like $30 a year. I found out they were charging me $168 for subsequent years. It was kind of, I just didn't look at it. That's a zombie fee. So look at those zombie fees and get them turned off. Maybe you said to yourself, I'll turn this off before the trial period ends. I'll give this political candidate one time, and then they start sending it every month. Those are zombie fees. Now, here's some approaches to budgeting that are pretty common. I don't think that any of them are right for everybody. So one is that you divide your life into 3 buckets, literally 3 envelopes, some people say: expenses, fun, and savings. If you're somebody who's going to have fun anyway, budget it. Don't pretend you're not going to go out with your friends and have cocktails, or don't pretend that you're not going to do it if you are going to do it. But put a budget on it so you can keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't become twice as much as you thought it was. So expenses, fun, and then savings, 3 buckets. So that's one. Another one is a concept called pay yourself first. So if your savings goal is, pick any number you want, $500 a month, $3,000 a month, doesn't matter. Put that savings away first, then figure out how you're going to live through the month after that. Is pay yourself first. Emergency fund, as we talked about a moment ago, everybody needs an emergency fund. So stack that up somewhere. Sometimes it helps to be able to have different accounts. The banks today will allow you to have 5, 6 savings accounts at no charge to you. And so if your bank doesn't do it that way, get a different bank, because you could go in and you could say, okay, this is my vacation account, and this is my retirement account, and this is the money I'm going to use for holidays. If that helps you keep out of those funds on a regular basis. If you get a new job, set up the automated savings. If they have a 401k, if they have investment accounts, you can set it up automated. Some states are actually doing it where you have to opt out of this. When you get a new job, you automatically are saving 10%. So that's a concept from Europe that's really powerful. So just set it up so it's automated so you don't even see it. If you get a raise, send half of it straight to savings and benefit from the other half. And if you do this over time, you'll have quite a bit of extra money going into your accounts. Make your housing pay. This is a concept people don't really do very much. So you can use roommates. You can get a duplex and rent out half of it. You can have a basement flat. I even ran into a guy in New Orleans that was literally renting balcony space to people to sleep in sleeping bags. So that's how he was making his housing pay. Get a mother-in-law unit. I ran into somebody in Arkansas who rented a tent to people on Airbnb. I couldn't believe Airbnb would do that, but he rented a tent out. So that's making your housing pay. And then on your 401k, if your company has a 401k match, that's free money to you. And usually you have to put up money first and then they'll match it. Get that free money. So make sure that your contributions are matching where they come into the equation. All right, so let's take a look at this. Signaling can make you poor and make you broke. So signaling is when you do things because you think other people in your class are going to expect you to do them. Okay, so signaling is the right car, the right house in the right neighborhood. You take the right kind of vacations. You have your kids in the right schools. You wear the right clothes, all that stuff. You belong to the right club. You play the right sports. This can cost you a lot. The Wall Street Journal has a beautiful little visual on this. Do you make $400,000 a year but still feel broke? You can watch that today. It's been out in one form or another for over a decade. And so they show how two people earning $400,000 a year can actually be broke quick because of signaling. Learn not to signal. As a matter of fact, this is interesting. Wealthy people frequently don't show their wealth. You can't see that they're wealthy. And then there's this other paradox. People who look wealthy are often broke. So if you could get past signaling, it will free you up to spend your money when you want to on these things, but not because your neighbor did or somebody at work did. You don't do it because you want to, and this will free you up and give you more money. Now let's take a look at this one, good debt versus bad debt. Good debt is debt that creates more income. That's what good debt is, or it allows you to smooth out a problem in your life. And bad debt is debt that you could have avoided and that it's really hard to get rid of. So bad debt is using credit cards for living expenses, short-term loans, fancier car than you need, vacation you bought on credit because somebody you knew was going and you said, I got a credit card, I'll go too. That's bad debt. An insidious form of bad debt is home equity loans. People are using home equity loans throughout their life, and then they get to retirement and they don't have a paid for house. So a home equity loan to pay for your kids' education might be an investment you want to make. To remodel your kitchen for the third time, that's not a very good idea. That's usually bad debt. And then home equity used for any kind of ongoing living expenses is bad debt. Now, good debt, again, creates more income or creates a higher investment portfolio. Education is an example of good debt. Buying a home, almost always. Buying investment property. Car you need because you got to get to work if you're working outside the city. Home equity used for investing, although I'm not as big a fan of that as some people are, but if you're careful, that's an example of using debt to create income or more capital. Let's take a look at education debt in particular. Education usually pays off. Overwhelmingly, it does. So if you get the doctorate, your unemployment rate is extremely low, your income's extremely high. If you get a professional degree, income is high, unemployment is low. So these degrees do pay back. Master's degree, they pay back. So within reason, investing in education is a good use of debt. within reason. Now let's take a look at this. This is a concept called the banker's secret. If you are paying on a mortgage that's new, almost all of that payment will be interest, and a very small amount of that payment will be principal. If you can make another payment per year, all of that payment will go to principal. So that reduces your interest and principal significantly if you can do it. It's called the banker's secret, also called sometimes the 13th month. People will take 1 month a year. If you're in a type of business where you get a bonus in March or April, just take that bonus and make an extra payment on your mortgage. And today's computers allow this to be smart. I mean, it will really knock back your mortgage a lot. You may be having your house paid for 6 or 7 or even 8 years faster than you thought using this technique when you can. So think about it. Because of the ratio of interest to principal, that second payment goes 100% to principal. The banker's secret. All right, let's talk about credit. Credit is misunderstood. It's kind of useful. It's frankly, in our society today, to not have any credit is a problem. But you need to be careful with it. Establish credit early. As it turns out, that's actually part of your credit score. Is how old were you when you got your first credit card? Using credit to acquire good debt is okay. Using credit to accumulate bad debt's a bad idea. College students are notorious for just throwing a couple of meals out, a little adventure, that vacation in Cancun, throwing that on credit cards. If you do this, you're going to be under a very large burden when you're a first-year working person and it's time to start paying that stuff back. There's an old saying, if you live like a lawyer when you're a law student, you'll certainly live like a law student when you're a lawyer. So be really careful with credit cards if you're in education, and get free credit cards. They usually have a higher interest rate, but if you're paying that off every month, then it doesn't matter. So that's something to think about. Credit scores, what goes into them is most of all, it's on-time payments. So make sure you pay on time. If you're somebody who forgets to pay, set it up to automatically deduct. The length of your credit history, I mentioned a minute ago that getting credit young actually is part of your credit score. The amount of credit available as versus the amount of credit you're using is called the credit utilization rate. You want that to be a lot of credit available, very little used. And they love installment loans because it shows your payment pattern. So here's a hot tip. Don't cancel credit cards. If you're not using a credit card, then just buy 1 tank of gas a year, buy one little small thing per year, something for your mom on Mom's Day, Mother's Day. And then leave that credit card around because it increases your credit score to have the credit available to you, whether you use it or you don't. And if you try to buy an apartment, try to buy a car, this will come into play. If you can't keep your fingers from using those credit cards, freeze them in a block of ice in your freezer. And if you have to get them out for an expense, it'll take hours for it to thaw out, and that'll give you a chance to change your mind. Experian Boost is a real gain for young people. A lot of young people have no installment loans. So how does Experian Boost work? It actually gets your payment patterns from your cable provider, your phone, and your utilities and your internet service provider, and makes that part of your credit rating. So credit scores, you want it to be as high as possible, but don't live for your credit score. Credit is just a tool. Now, suppose you have student loans, and people have them, and we know that, and they get into trouble because they become unemployed, etc. It's very important that you communicate with the holder of your student loans. So this is important because these are not dischargeable in bankruptcy anymore. They changed that law about 10 years ago. So you're stuck with this thing. And so you want to communicate. If you're unemployed, you'll get what's called forbearance. If you file a form, whether it's easy, you just got to file the form. That means that you don't have to pay on it. You simply have to, but interest is accruing. If you go to a more college, you go back to college, you'll get a deferment. That means that you don't have to pay them, and interest does not accrue on them. But you got to communicate with your lender so that they know where you're at and what you're doing. And it's important to stay on top of this. Income-based payment plans are right for many people that work for nonprofits or work for government agencies or teachers, etc. These rules are changing all the time. You'd think that these loans would be static and the rules would be clear, but they're changing all the time. Right now, no one is paying them because of the pandemic, but that will change soon enough. The whole point about student loans is the top line: communicate, communicate, communicate. By the way, you can't get forbearance or deferment if you're in arrears, so you'll have to catch up in order to get those benefits. All right, let's talk about the basics of investing. Investing is not that hard to learn. It's maybe hard to get really sophisticated, but you don't have to be sophisticated to invest. Savings accounts are insured by the FDIC up to $250,000 per bank account. Actually, per bank and type of account. Be a little bit careful. I would not put more than $250,000 in any bank if you're interested in the FDIC insurance. It's very, very, very unlikely you would ever lose that money because of the insurance. Stocks long-term return is 7.5% over the last 100 years. You will see some places that listed at 10%, but that's very selective. They're actually not considering the entire stock market. You can lose all your investment in stocks. You can buy companies that go out of business and your investment goes to zero. Housing, a very good investment most places, but not everywhere. Housing does not only go up. That's a myth. Although it will seem like that in New York, and it will seem like that in San Francisco, but housing can go down a lot. And so you can lose all of your investment in housing because you get upside down on your loan. And then you have to do a short sale. And so housing is not risk-free. Bonds historically return about 5%. That's generous, but that's the long-term history of it. If your bond guarantor goes bankrupt, you will lose the value of that bond. So there's risk in every one of these categories, perhaps with the exception of United States Treasuries. Don't forget about inflation. Inflation has been dormant for a couple of decades, but it's suddenly roaring back, most inflation in 40 years, which changes all of these returns. Because if inflation is 8% and you're getting 5% on some bonds, you're losing 3% of the value of those that investment all over time. Buy and hold. That means that you buy an investment and you leave it alone. Most people tell you don't look at your investment accounts a lot. Don't trade a lot. Just buy it, let it sit there. Don't read it every month. Don't worry about it. Let it do its job. Let the miracle of compounding do its job over time. So risk versus reward. Unfortunately, and one of the reasons we have this program, and Jeremy has sponsored this, there's some very bad advice out there floating around. And it seems that young people are particularly susceptible to it. Very high risk financial activity is gambling. So I mean, literally gambling. Las Vegas, playing the lottery. If you play it a little bit for fun, that's probably fine. That's just entertainment. It's not an investment strategy. Very high risk is trading stock options. You can not only lose all that you've wagered, but you can lose 10 times that amount because of the way options work. They're particularly dangerous for unsophisticated people. My advice is no young person or novice investor at any age should be fooling around with options because it's really gambling. Very high risk is day trading. Most day traders go broke sooner or later. People think they have this wonderful technique, and sooner or later they get on the wrong side of something. That's gambling. A very high risk is crypto and non-fungible tokens. So this also, it's interesting. We don't know. Nobody knows whether crypto is going to hold value over a decade or not. It could go to a ridiculously nothing. NFTs could turn out to be some kind of massive mutual joke. So we don't know. And so I always like to follow the Warren Buffett rule. If you don't understand it, don't invest in it. So crypto and NFT is very high risk. High risk is also picking individual stocks. If you pick individual stocks, you're exposing yourself to the performance of that particular stock. Moderate risk with solid return is index funds that are held long term. So you're betting on the tide, you're not betting on a particular wave. And tides are pretty reliable, waves are not. So index funds are a great place for people to put their funds. Index funds have beaten almost all stock pickers over the last 20 years. So index funds are moderate risk, solid return. Bond funds, low returns, low risk, and very, very low risk, as I said before, is treasury bonds. But a couple of these things may end up on the wrong side of inflation. Let's say you like to gamble. Let's say you say, oh, Don, I understand what you're saying, but I actually want to buy crypto. Okay. How much should you dedicate to speculative stuff like this? I think if you want to do it, and I cannot keep you from doing it, allocate a small amount of your portfolio to it and entertain yourself that way. But the problem with this, even that way, is gamblers lose in the long run. All gamblers lose in the long run. The number of people who have a positive gambling record is minuscule. And most people who say they're professional gamblers are lying to themselves. So anyway, carve out a portion and use that if you want. But I do want to make this warning. If you put 7% of your portfolio into high risk, highly speculative investments and you lose them, that's the return on the rest of your portfolio. So you basically got nothing because you gambled away your actual profit increase in value. So as an entertainment, fine. You want to go to Las Vegas and lose $1,000 sometime? Go ahead. But it's not an investment strategy. Which brings up diversification. Diversification is what protects you from movements in markets that you can't control and movements in specific investments that you can't control. So all investing involves risk. Higher returns involve almost always higher risk, which is where the higher returns come from. And so the safest thing you can do is invest across wide sectors and even different sectors of types of investment. So here's a couple of examples that people miss of non-diversification. I once ran into a guy who had 4 stocks, and he said, these 4 stocks are going to send my kids to college. This was right before the dot-com bust, so it's an old story. I tracked those 4 stocks because I was curious what would happen. He lost his entire investment in about a year after the next crash. And so that's not diversification. He had so much confidence in those 4 stocks, and it was unwarranted. So here's another example of non-diversification. A landlord that owns all of her entire investment is in one neighborhood. That neighborhood may burn down. That neighborhood may go bad, go south. There's things that could happen that cause that to be unwise. Then number 2, this happens a lot, is people, they'll go to work every day and the company will give them stock. If they do that, great, sell that stock and buy some other stock because you have too much exposure at work already. You already work there. Your career is exposed to the outcomes of that investment. So I hope that will help you. Diversification is not hard. Own different kinds of things and don't own anything with only 4 in it. I don't care what it is. Don't do that. Buying a home is a good investment almost always, unless you buy it in a place where the city then goes to heck, which does happen. It happened in New York several decades ago. Long memory to remember when it did, but it did. You're going to need 3 to 5% down and also pay for mortgage insurance. If you were going to buy a $300,000 home, which won't buy you anything in New York City, but it will in some places, a starter home, you're going to need $9,000 to $15,000 to procure that home. A lot of people get this from family. Family will step in and help you with a down payment. I did read an article about 2 people who lived in a park for 6 months to save up enough money to have a down payment for a house. He was a cop and she was a teacher. That's commitment. They made that goal and they did something unusual to get there, and nobody helped them at all. So don't say to yourself, I can't do it. Just figure out how you can do it. You're going to have closing costs, about $5,000. And then when you get your home, a concept that I keep, proposing is make your home pay you back somehow. So, carve out an apartment, carve out a mother-in-law, rent an Airbnb room, do your best to get some more money out of that thing. Stocks, nobody in the long run beats the market. So people will tell you, oh, I've got this technique or I've got this approach. In the long run, they're not going to beat the market. And in the long run, nobody can time the market either. So timing the market means that you pull your money when you think the market's going to be flat or downtrending, and you put it all back in when you think you see the bottom of the market. Here's the problem. Nobody can see the bottom of the market. And a lot of the gains that come after a nadir in the market come in the very first few days after everybody decides, oh, the market's coming back up. You're not in. If you jump in later, you missed a lot of the return in value. So I know everybody's got an uncle that says, I've got a technique, it's surefire. All of these things work until the day they don't. So my advice is put it in there, forget it, stop looking at it every day, never day trade, and don't move stuff around. That's going to work better in the long run. Fees matter. If your employer has a high fee investment plans, complain about it. Tell them you want lower fee options, or move all your money out of there if you can into a brokerage that's discounted. So I hope that's useful. This is something it's well known in the financial world. An ape throwing darts at the financial pages will actually pick stocks that perform higher than people who are paid millions of dollars to pick stocks. Let that sink in. Random selection of stocks beats intentional selection of stocks over time. And so, the weird thing about this is they're always touting somebody, oh, she's a genius. She had 25% uptick last year. Well, that's great, but so did 99 other people who were doing the same kinds of things as she was. They all lost money. So it's anomalous. They take the media really is bad about this. You've got to look at the practice over a large number of people to see how the strategy works. And maybe you should just get a chimpanzee and some darts. All right, now this is a financial tool. It's called the Rule of 72. And so the time to double your investment equals 72 divided by the rate of return. So it's just a pretty common tool. So if you have 7% return, stocks have traditionally over time returned 7.5%. In about 10 years and 4 months, your investment is going to double. Okay. So about every 10 years, it's going to double. So maybe that's not a big deal when you're 25, but if you keep doing this over time, it can become like the rice grains on the chessboard. Clyde is actually my brother, and he said to me once, he said, once you get past $1 million, this gets pretty exciting. Now he's done well, he just sits there and watches it double. He doesn't spend any money at all. But that's the rule of 72. So if you're looking at different investments, divide it by your return, and that'll give you the time it will take to double. Now, one option to consider if you want help and you have a portfolio, you have some investments, and you want advice. Generally, a fee-based wealth advisor is the best way to get what's called fiduciary advice. They have to give you advice that's best for you, not for them. That's what fiduciary means. And if you have a stockbroker that works for an investment house, they don't have a fiduciary obligation to you. They can recommend the worst investment in the world if it pays a high commission. So if you do need help at some point, consider going to a fee-based wealth advisor. This is some advice I got from someone I interviewed once. He was talking about his approach to money. He said, you make part of your money from your job. He was a doctor. You make part of your money from your hobby. He had a small side business trading in stuff, which I could describe, but that's not the point. His hobby was actually a for-profit hobby. And make part of your money from your money. You will eventually arrive at a point where you make most of your money from your money. that your money income actually exceeds your income from working. This happens when housing goes up. People earn $200,000 because their house went up, even if they only earn $150,000. And it also happens late in your life when your portfolio is large. Your money can be the main source of your money. I like that. I like that little principle. It's a principle. Make part of your money from your job, part of your money from your hobby, and part of your money from your money. Now let's take a look at insurance. Insurance is something you need, but you don't need every kind of insurance you can possibly buy. Insurance protects you against catastrophic losses that you cannot survive. Okay, so if you're in the world and you cannot afford, a massive medical expense, which many people in the community have faced, you've got to have as much insurance as it takes to protect you from that. Insurance, of course, spreads the risk across groups of people. And so some people will not have that expense. They pay insurance and don't get anything back. Other people will. If you can afford to cover this is a philosophical point. If you can afford to cover the expense and you assess that you have average risk or better, don't buy insurance for that. So let's say you're buying an iPhone, and it's $800, and $800 is not a ton of money to you. Then don't buy insurance for it unless you're higher than average risk. Because if you incurred that expense, you could cover it. Now, that's kind of a little bit of an expensive example, but I once bought a little fan for my desk that cost like $15. And they said, do you want insurance for that? And I was like, no, I don't need insurance for a $15 fan. So that's what I'm talking about. And I do need everybody to understand that insurance companies have a horrible reputation for a reason. So what am I getting at? They sometimes do not pay things that you thought you were purchasing coverage for. So these are all real examples from people I've interviewed. A phone was insured for damage. They took it in. They said, you got your phone wet. Getting your phone wet violates the insurance coverage. The person told me, I didn't get my phone wet. They just said I did. The house was insured for a hurricane. They actually said, well, your house was not damaged by the hurricane. It was damaged by the flood. The house is gone, so nobody knows what happened to the house. But they said, oh, it was the flood that carried away that house. So you don't have flood insurance. Luggage was insured for life. A person tried to take it in. They said, our guarantee was for materials and workmanship. It looks like you just wore out this luggage. I think you're seeing a pattern. Home appliances were insured. They said, this washing machine is really old, past its expected service. If you read the terms of our agreement, we don't cover really old appliances that are past their service expectations. So as you interact with insurance companies, keep this in mind. Sometimes you don't get what you think you're getting. Watch out for changing values. Are you insured for what you paid for it, what it would cost to replace it, or what it's worth now? Those are three different ways to value a loss. Watch out for replacement cost versus the value if it was sold. If you buy a new car, drive it off the lot, and it's totaled, your insurance, there's two different kinds. You can have one kind where it covers replacement of that car, and another one where it gives you the value of that car. You need to know which one you've got. You should review all your insurance coverages annually, okay? Now let's talk about good insurance and bad insurance. Bad insurance is insurance for stuff that you could replace yourself. TVs, computers, $15 fans. Home appliance insurance. If you have a home, stuff goes bad, but you can build that into your planning and cover it. Or you can get a type of insurance that covers the appliances in your house. You should only get that if an appliance would actually cause you a financial emergency. And it's not inexpensive, by the way. Car repair insurance, usually for most people, not a good buy. And whole life insurance, there's a way to work that into a bigger financial plan, but whole life is generally not the best way to invest your money. Now, good insurance is car insurance if you have a car, especially uninsured motorist coverage. That's an option. And so far as I know, in every state, make sure you have that. Renter's insurance, if somebody breaks into your house or your house burns down, that's a good buy, an important buy. Health insurance, if you have kids, buy term life insurance until they turn 18, and then turn that off. Don't do that past that point. And umbrella insurance, if you have a portfolio, let's say you've been lucky or careful or both, and you have a portfolio, at some point you're going to need umbrella insurance to protect you from lawsuits. Okay, so we're going to move quickly through the rest of the slides. How to move to a new city. Moving is a secret power in life management, and it's becoming a lost power. People have forgotten how to move from one city to another city. And so if you can move, you can solve career problems and you can make different financial decisions. So in one of the recent downturns, if you had a driver's license and could pass a drug test, you could make $100,000 a year in North Dakota. All you had to do is get there. And so people weren't going there. People were starving to death all over the United States, and they wouldn't hitchhike to North Dakota and work for $100,000 a year. So learn how to move. Moving is down. It's due to the cost of housing mostly. So only 10% of households will move this year, and that is a record low. Half as many people moved today as moved in the 1960s. So how do you reduce this cost? First, last, and deposit is a lot. Let's be honest. Okay, let's say you rent for $2,000 a month. So first and last is $4,000, and deposit is probably $1,000 or $2,000. So you're at $5,000 or $6,000 to move, and you got to get there. So that's pretty expensive. But let's say you got a really good job offer in a place you don't live. Don't rent a house or an apartment. Rent a room in a house that's co-opted with other people. That's a lot cheaper way to go to a new town. Stay in a long-term stay hotel. Those are usually, some of them, if they're in a non-great area, can be dirt cheap. Land at the YMCA. I once moved for a job and lived in a hotel for 2 months before I could put together money to rent a place. And then I rented a room instead of a whole apartment. Couch surf, live in an RV park, be an apartment manager. Solve this problem. If moving will get you where you need to be, solve the problem and don't just say, I can't do that. Now, we're going to cover this quickly, but some of this is pretty important stuff. Lies, damn lies, and the manipulation of statistics. There is no such thing as a free lunch. That's a truism. It's true because it's true. When something sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. Okay. So if you'll follow these principles, it'll keep you out of trouble. If something is heavily advertised, it will cost more than similar things less advertised. So if somebody's advertising lots in the subdivision and going mad about it, they're on TV every day, those lots are going to cost more than similar lots that are not advertised every day. Vacation property, timeshares, investments, auto repair shops, heavy advertising means higher costs for you. And even though this is in every single ad for financial products, people have this ability to ignore it. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. So if it's done well lately, that doesn't mean it's going to keep doing well. Okay, so this is, I shouldn't reveal some of these, but I'm going to do it anyway. How stock funds prevaricate. Prevaricate means, of course, to lie. So a brokerage has 125 investment products, and let's say that 3 of them are doing really well. Then they talk all about those 3, and they ignore the other 100-something investment products they have. They don't talk about them. Failing stock funds are folded into winning funds. So they can actually say all of our funds are above average, because if they have a dog fund, they just merge it with another fund that's doing well. And then here's what old school stockbrokers would do. They'd get a list of people and they would give them, these are potential accounts, and they'd say, okay, well, I'm gonna give you a stock tip and you'll see how brilliant I am. So they would give them a stock tip. If the stock went up, they'd call that person and say, that's how brilliant I am. You should put your money with me. If it went down, they didn't call them. So that's as old as the day is long. Welcome to New York. Okay, so what about investment schemes? Well, If people pitching investment schemes had a scheme that worked, do you think they'd be pitching it on TV? No, they'd be running the scheme themselves. So the more they pitch this stuff on TV, the less likely it is a true benefit to anybody. And remember this, anyone who guarantees an unusually high return, anyone is lying. Anyone who guarantees an unusually high return is lying. So I hope this has been useful. Jeremy has some questions from the community, as I understand it. My advice to you is to go out there, work hard, save and invest, and take the long view. And that'll keep you out of almost all trouble. I want to thank you for your attention. And I turn the mic over to you, Jeremy.
That's great. Thank you so much. Great presentation. I really appreciate all of that content. I did get some people sending in questions. The first one I have here, the person says they're late in their life and looking at saving, but they haven't saved so far. Do you have any tips for them trying to get started with saving a little later?
Yeah, my tip for them is it's never too late, but you're really just going to have to keep working. So if you don't have anything saved and this is not always because somebody did something wrong. Sometimes it's because they've had a terrible health experience that interrupted their financial planning. But if you have no savings, you're going to have to keep working. And so that involves finding something that you don't hate, that you don't mind to go do. And right now, older workers are finding a warm and responsive job market. I don't think that's going to change because I have access to the demographic trends that suggest that even if there's a temporary hiring slowdown, it's going to come back strong. So people have to look at what kind of work they could do into their 60s and even into their 70s. I have a friend retired from a university position. She really likes people. And she said, I just went down to the local Earth Gardens store. I don't know what you call them. Health food store. And she said, I just talk to people all day long and ring stuff up. She said, it's super easy and I like it. Now, is that different? Yes, but she's going to have to keep earning for quite some time. And so that's my advice is find some kind of work that you could keep doing because that is probably the only way out of a very late approach to savings. The other thing you can do is sometimes people have a hidden asset. Maybe they have an apartment paid for in New York and they say, well, I'm broke, I'm 55, I'm at the end of things. Move to rural Florida into a trailer park and you might be able to sell that apartment for enough to live the rest of your life pretty nicely down in Florida.
That's a great point. Another question that came in was about budgeting. They asked, are there any tech solutions you recommend to help with budgeting? Is there anything along those lines?
There is. I could send you a handout on this. I have it on another screen. I might could even look at it.
Yeah, well, we can always put that into a list of resources with the video. So
yeah, let's do that.
Watching, we'll include it in the list of the videos. I was impressed by the question because I feel like nowadays our phones and all that, there's a lot of help that exists, and you don't have to just do it on a piece of paper and pencil. So at the bottom of this video, you'll see a couple of budgeting tools that might be helpful. Doug,
that is a great question.
There's another question here about debt. This person says that they've racked up quite a bit of debt and they do want to start approaching it differently. Is there a technique to kind of get rid of this in like a snowball or some sort of fashion?
Yeah, there's kind of two approaches. And so people find themselves in debt sometimes because of divorce. And as we've said several times, sometimes because of a health emergency that really interrupts their planning. And you might find yourself on the wrong side of a bunch of credit cards, on the wrong side even of payday loans, which you should avoid at all costs. But in any case, what you do is you make a table of all of them and you put the amount that you owe, and you put the minimum payment, and you put the interest rate. Now, here's where the two philosophies are different. One of them is, and Dave Ramsey is a big proponent of this. He says take the smallest one first and get rid of it. Just get it off of your table, regardless of the interest rate. Just get it off your table. You'll feel better as you go down from having 10 things you're paying a month to paying 7 and then 6. And that's his philosophy. I don't agree with it because it's not rational to me. You should pay down the maximum on the highest interest rate loan that you have. And so his is get rid of the small ones. You'll feel like you're accomplishing. And mine is get rid of the highest interest rate debt that you have. But all of this is predicated upon the idea that you're going to stop borrowing more. So you've got to stop borrowing more, and then you can start to get rid of some of this debt. But that's the snowball. There's two versions. One, you get rid of the smallest accounts first, and the other one, you get rid of the highest interest rate borrowing first.
So thank you. Here's the last question that came from the community. This person experienced some extra medical debt, and they were having trouble paying it, and it actually, combined with some other things in their life, has really affected their credit score. I don't know if you have any advice for someone who's dealing with that, trying to build back their credit score, or in general dealing with medical debt.
Yeah, this is very interesting because this has just changed recently, as in just the last few months. Over this summer, all of the major credit rating agencies are going to begin to remove a penalized credit score due to medical debt. Now, here's the problem. People hear that and they think it means they don't have to pay the medical debt. That's not what the rules are. I looked them up. The rules are very simple. You have to clear the medical debt. And once you clear it, they will remove its impact on your credit score. But if you can't clear it because it's $100,000, $300,000 or some other kind of disastrous amount and you simply can't pay it, this is no relief to you at all. But if you can, by any method, get that debt cleared, then all three of the major credit rating agencies are going to remove that prior latent payment pattern from their analysis of your credit. So I always worry when people hear stuff, they don't hear the whole story. And Jeremy, thanks for asking so we could address this.
No, I really appreciate it. Like what's really great about these sessions is that in the end, it's small steps that people can make. A lot of times people don't even know where to start. So hopefully anybody who's sitting at home, find a couple of these things that you can do. And that's how you have to do it. You just have to start and do the small steps. The small steps pay off over time. That grain of rice gets doubled and doubled and doubled. Then the board won't hold it. So big thank you to you. It's always a pleasure, Don.
My pleasure, Jeremy. Thanks.
See you guys. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.